Hey everyone, it's George Trombley here for Polyglot George. I'm here in Korea and I just finished a private class in the morning and then a group class for Korean here at Seoul Language Academy in Gangnam. And I was thinking over the last few days about my current level of Korean, and I was thinking about what stage I'm at in Korean. And I realized that, and I think those of you that are polyglots like me, or that know, that just means you know multiple languages, you've gotten to a point where you understand how language learning works. And for me, what I've realized is that at this stage in my learning, let me just make sure this is right. In this stage in my learning, I realized that it's all about error removal, removing the errors from your language. In the beginning, when you learn a language, you can have many mistakes because it's just impressive that you speak the language at all, and the people around you, they don't expect much of you. Much like, if you're a baby and that first time you walk, if you really analyze it, you suck as a baby walking. You're like, nah, you're bumping the things, you're falling down. Like if an adult did that though, you would think, wow, you really suck at walking, or you're drunk. But when you're learning a language, it's the same. When you say konnichiwa, watashi no namae wa, oh, it's amazing because wow, you understand how watashi works and no and namae, and your accent isn't good, but who cares? You're speaking another language. It's amazing. Then you start getting a little bit more advanced in Japanese or whatever. Like, watashi wa, and you start sounding a little bit better. And it's like, wow, ジョージって言うんですけども、友達のでは、友達同士では, and you start saying more complicated things, and then when you say something wrong, it's accentuated a lot more. Just kind of thinking about something that happened today, and I realized that I'm totally at this state now where the small nuanced differences in Korean that I don't use, like for example, I might say one way to say because. Well, there are a ton of ways to say because, and my teacher keeps correcting me, and it's disheartening. It's like it hurts inside every time she does it, because I thought I had a good understanding of how the two ways. There's a oyo so, and then there's unika for how to say because in Korean. And I typically have gotten into the pattern of using unika. So I'm like, momomo hanika, or hesosunika. And she kept changing it to momomo heso. And when you're in the middle of saying something and a teacher corrects you, it's like punch you in the face. It's like, oh, you're wrong, you're not doing it right. And I'm like, but I know how Korean works. This should work. Because when you use oyo so, that's a way to say because, but there's limitations to how it's used. It's the reason, the reason why something happened, and then the result after that, but you're not allowed to put a command, or you're not allowed to put a suggestion. You can only say the result of the because. But when you want to say the result, a command, or you want to say a suggestion, you can use nika. But it's also used for all sorts of things. It can be used for other just standard reasons. But I learned today a new nuance of that is that when you use oyo so, that's when you're saying the reason for the first time, where the people that you're talking to have never heard of what you're talking about and it's new to them. This is a very detailed nuance that I don't think I would have known early on, and I think if someone taught it to me early on, I wouldn't have been able to grasp it. So it really is truly error fixing and nuance changes to your language. So nika, just to finish the statement, nika is all about being a stronger way of saying because, but it also is a way to restate something that they already should theoretically know. So I learned that today. I finally got because for the last few days she's been correcting me, and I was frustrated, and I couldn't figure out why I kept getting fixed. Another one that really shocked me, but also changed my understanding of maybe how Japanese works, And this happens surprisingly enough because a lot. I mean, in Korea because Korean and Japanese are such similar grammar. But in Japanese, you say "otsukare-sama deshita." Okay, after someone has done a good day's work, you say "otsukare-sama deshita," and the root of that is "oh, you're tired." Otsukareru, and it's "oh" in front to make it sound polite. Oh, very tiring for you, meaning you did a great job. Thank you for your hard work. Well, Korean has the exact same phrase. It's sugohada is the verb. So you say sugohashida to be polite. So if I'm at work and I'm done with work, I could say to my other workers as I go home, I could say sugohashosseyo, okay, or sugohashos습니다, and that would be nice. And I have been saying that now for close to 3 years. I've been saying that at the end of every class to my teacher. I would say sugohashos습니다. I have been through maybe 5 or 6 teachers where I've said that. Today, punched in the face. I got punched in the face by my teacher, who, by the way, is cute. And because she's cute, it makes it even worse that she said it to me. She said, "그렇게 안 써요. We don't use it that way. You don't say 수고하셨습니다 to a teacher." I'm like, what? And I'm indignant. And I'm like, look, I've been coming to this exact school for a month every time I come here. So I've at least been a student here for 7 months. And not one teacher has told me that I can't say 수고하셨어요 to the teacher. Apparently, it's rude because you're not working with them. You're supposed to say just 감사합니다. Mind explosion. So, because this is the Polyglot channel, I want to talk about one more thing that I love about learning these multiple languages. It's the way you can connect things in ways that you couldn't connect them, and why and this is why your fourth language, for example, is much faster than your third, and your third is faster than your second. And I imagine my fifth would be like, I started studying Russian and now I'm fluent, in one day. Probably not. But there's a thing I learned in Chinese, and forgive my accent because I've only had 1 hour of Chinese officially from a teacher. But there's "chirba." "Chirba" means eat. It's a command. It's like "chirba," or I can't think of anything else. Just imagine another verb, because I don't know if you can do it with listening, like ting ba, ting ba. I don't know if you can do that, but maybe you can, and I'll have to ask tomorrow when I have another class. But it's a command, right? And you're thinking, well, how can I remember that command? Well, if you were only knowing English, you would think, oh, well, I just have to remind that BA means a command for some reason. But in Japanese, you have a very similar expression that's not a command, it's a suggestion, but suggestions are often sounding like a command. So they might say, "Ikeba, why don't you go?" Or "sureba, why don't you do it?" So that's a ba right at the ending. Korean has the exact same thing. They say, "Mogoba, just try it." It's ba like that is like try to eat it, right? In Japanese, they might say like "shite mireba," why don't you try to do it? But it's a command, right? So the Koreans have the same thing. "Heba, mogoba." So in my mind, my link now for those 3 languages is ba, ba, ba. And it's unforgettable. I have zero resistance in my brain to it. I have there's a lot of pushback when you try to learn something new sometimes. Your brain can't wrap your head around it. Like my higher level Korean is getting that. Like, well, I've learned all these other ways to say these Korean phrases, but now you're giving me this whole new way to say it that they only say in newspapers or that they only say on in a textbook. So my brain pushes back. But with something like this where it's just ba, 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 your basic level language learning, dude, if you know more than one. That's why people always say, should I learn my new language? Should I go to another language? Fuck yeah. Move on. Because you have so many tools at your disposal to learn that new language. There are some connections that I can't even remember, but I remember when I made a connection in Chinese, or when I was in Beijing for a month and I was learning some Chinese at that point, I remember thinking, wow, that is the strangest connection you could ever make. But for me, it works. This roundabout way of connecting a Korean concept to a Japanese concept to remember the Chinese, is, by the way, not genius or special in any way. It really isn't. It is a product of human nature. We find patterns and we find them in the weirdest way and we link things. So, don't know how else to end that, but by saying, start your next language. If you're on this channel, there's only at this making this video, I don't even think there's 50 subscribers to this channel. But if you're here because you know me from YesJapan.com, or if you're here because you know me from my books or from Korean from Zero.com, and you're just curious, or you're here because, oh, I like George and I just want to see what he's saying. Sometimes he says some fun things. I'm going to say to you, don't just be here for that. Be here for, expanding your base of language. Because only 4 years ago, I was the Japanese George. There was only, my entire self-identity was only Japanese. And now my self-identity is very strongly Korean and Japanese. I am the expert in those fields to all of my friends. And everyone knows that I am that. Well, starting as of yesterday, I become Chinese George. I become the Asian George at this point. Like, wow, he knows Chinese, he knows Korean. And of course, obviously, I don't know Chinese very well. I just started. But I'm very certain, and I told the school when I started, that I'm going to be very good very fast. Because I believe it, because I know it. I did it with Korean. I feel very confident about my Korean, although there's those days where you don't feel that way. But so I would say to you, it's not as hard as you think. Even babies can learn a language. So that's all I have to say. 다음에 봐요. Mata kondo and 再见. I think that's how you say it. Bye.